If all the candidates can make their way to their seats, we're going to get started. Everyone, if you can find a seat as well, we're going to get started too. Hello, everyone. How are y'all doing this mornings? Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Experimental Station. My name is Tiffany Walden. I am the co-founder and editor-in-chief of the Triibe, and this is Asada Lewis. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Asada Lewis. I'm a member of Good Kids Mad City, which mainly focuses on violence prevention, but you know that violence stems from a lot of other issues that are very, very important, which we're going to talk about today. So I hope everybody's ready. How y'all feeling? Good? Okay.
So we are hosting this forum today as we are less than 2 weeks out from the election to talk about some of the issues that's going on in the 20th Ward and to talk to our candidates to see, you know, who best serves our needs as a Black community in the 20th Ward. So let's relax, let's take a deep breath, and let's have a really good discussion here today. So I want the candidates to go ahead and introduce themselves, and we're going to go in ballot order. So Jeanette Taylor, would you mind introducing yourself? And also, we have a time limit because it's so many candidates. So we're gonna take 2 minutes each to introduce.
So I'm Jeanette Taylor, candidate for 20th Ward Alderman. My punch number is 60. I live in Woodlawn. I'm a longtime Southsider. I was on the local school council for 21 years. I've community organized for the last 10 years. I went on a hunger strike to save Dahlia High School, and I also supported the young people in the community to get a trauma center. So I'm running because I am tired of elected officials who don't bring us to the table when they make decisions. We're required to pay taxes, but we never have a say-so how those tax dollars are spent. They can turn a laundromat into a Kentucky Fried Chicken overnight and not have a conversation with the people in the community. And so that doesn't happen in Lincoln Park or High Park. And so I'm dead set on it's because of the color of my skin, so I call it what it is racism. And so I'm tired of living in communities where I'm not respected as a Black woman or mother. And so I'm running for that very reason. And so win, lose, or draw, whoever makes the seat, we got to be at the table to make sure that we hold them accountable. And so my punch number is 60, and I'm Jeanette Taylor.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us, Jeanette. Nicole Johnson, would you like to introduce yourself? Also, everyone on the television here, we have the candidate stances too, so we're going to have that available online after the event as well.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nicole Johnson, candidate for Alderman in the 20th Ward. My punch number is 61. My story began on December 23rd, 2011. I was home during my senior year of college for my holiday break. And what turned out to be a short conversation with my mother about when I'm going to walk the dog prevented me from being caught in gun crossfire that left 2 people dead at a church's chicken and 4 people wounded. And so that happened early in my life and my understanding of the world around me, and that played a pivotal moment, and it alerted me that 1, my community was in danger, and 2, that I had work to do. And since that day, I've devoted my life to public service. When I finished my college experience at the University of Michigan, I returned back home and served as a 3rd grade math teacher in Chicago Public Schools on the west side and the southwest side. I'm running simply because we deserve better. That is our campaign slogan. We deserve better schools. We deserve opportunities to economically empower our families and our youth. And we deserve safe communities. Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Nicole Johnson, and my punch number is 61.
Thank you so much, Nicole. And now we're going to have Maya Hodari.
Good afternoon. My name is Maya Hodari. 10 years ago, I came out of my house with literally my infant at the time on my hip. I came out of my house because the level of crime going on in front of our homes was simply unacceptable. I had a daytime job. I've worked in the same agency for the last 23 years, and I redeveloped blighted tracts of land across the city. In my personal time, I worked alongside neighbors like Gene. I've worked with Janora on my block and been on his block, because I refuse to accept the level of disinvestment, the poor performing schools that our Southside neighborhoods have been subjected to, the increased level of violent crime. I push back. I grew up in an activist household. I understand the power that neighbors and community has to truly make a change. I embrace that. I'm running for alderman. I'm the outsider in this race. I'm independent. I can't be bought. I won't be silenced. I'm the outsider. I'm not a candidate with a well-funded campaign. I've been defying odds with a handful of committed volunteers and a few dollars from myself and committed neighbors. I wasn't supposed to get the endorsement of the Chicago Tribune or the Chicago Sun-Times. It's because of my demonstrated record and commitment to our neighborhood, to improving everyday families' quality of life. I'm in this race. I'm a little guy. I'm not afraid of fighting. I wasn't supposed to survive a petition challenged by 2 well-funded candidates. I'm fighting every day because I understand the need for everyday people to have a power and a voice in our decision making. I hope you will support me. Punch 62. I need your vote right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maya. Now we're going to have Jennifer Maddox.
Good afternoon, everyone. How you doing? Thank you so much for coming out. Appreciate your time. Great to see all the lovely faces in the room. My name is Jennifer Maddox. I started serving actually the 3rd District in the city of Chicago in 1996 when I decided to dedicate my life to service, and that's my career as a Chicago police officer at this time. During the course of that, patrolling the residents in the community over here, I was patrolling the area on 64th and King Drive in the Woodlawn community called Parkway Garden Apartments. That is a low-income housing complex that has 694 units, over 1,200 youth that reside there. And I noticed that we needed to do something different over in the area. There were no safe spaces over there. There were nothing for the young people to do. So I talked with the residents. We started doing some focus groups. We started sitting down and we started working with the community to find out what it was that we can do to make sure that we had some opportunities available for the young people and their families over there. Today, we have been recognized twice nationally on a national platform through CNN as a top CNN hero and also through L'Oreal Paris as a woman of worth. It's not just me, it's the residents, it's the community that said, let's take charge of our own community and bring back some of those resources and opportunities. Just today, I left 16 young men to come over here because we started a barber program. It's an entrepreneurship program that is housed in Parkway Christian Church, and we are teaching the trade of barbering to our young men over there so that they can start earning a legit wage. I am running for alderman because I've been committed to this community for so long, and I've given all of my time to make sure that we do what we need to do to bring resources and opportunities back to our ward. Thank you so much. My name is Jennifer Maddox and Punch 67.
Thank you, Jennifer. We appreciate that. Reverend Andre Smith is not here. Bernard Newell is also not here. So we're going to go to Quandra Spites.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Quandra Spates, and I'm running for Alderman of the 20th Ward. My punch number is 71. I've lived and worked in the 20th Ward for several years, as well as my family has lived in this ward for over 40 years. I decided to run for the alderman of this ward due to the lack of engagement, leadership, and community neglect I've experienced as a Chicago resident. Our communities are failing. We're suffering from a broken, corrupt, do-nothing system. My education is, I've graduated from Clark, Atlanta with a BA. I went on to the University of Minnesota and got a double master's degree in human resources and industrial relations. I also have an MBA and a JD from Valparaiso University School of Law. I feel that my extensive work experience will be greatly benefited here in the 20th Ward. Managing processes, working with diverse groups of people, as well as managing multi-million-dollar budgets. As you all know, the alderman has decided to step down, so we need an effective leader. I'm that leader. As an alderman, I will focus on several things in this community, especially economic development, providing training and development to the current residents of the ward, making sure I'm working with stakeholders to create a safe environment for our family and our children, as well as creating transparency in government to ensure that the community has a voice at the table and that we're all working together, working workable solutions, real solutions to rebuild our community. I know how to meet people where they are. I know the value of building people up and working with stakeholders to improve this current situation. My name is Quandra Spates. Please punch 71. I need your support on February 26th. Once again, thank you.
Thank you so much, and my apologies on your name, Spates. And so now we're going to go to Kevin Bailey.
All right. How you all doing today? Thanks for coming on out. I'm Kevin Bailey, the current 20th Ward Democratic Committeeman. I've been working in the community for the last 3 years in an unpaid role and position, continuing the work that I said I was going to do the first time I ran for alderman. I talked about some of the issues then that I learned knocking door to door, including the gentrification that's taking place. I've actually had a lot of experience battling gentrification and making sure that eminent domain is actually applied in a proper fashion that I don't think any of my colleagues up here have done. But regardless of that, I've continued to fight and build and invest in different precinct organizations, set up committees to focus on specific issues around economic development, health and human services, public safety, and so forth. The last economic development forum we had, it was 130 people that attended. Mental health was about 350. We do this to highlight the issues that are in our community, that it's not just problems, but we are actively engaging and organizing together to solve it with solutions that are from the people. Unfortunately, I won't be able to be here the whole time because there are 4 forums today. So that's me, civil engineer by degree in trade, dual Division I sport athlete. All the things that I've done politically, I've also engaged with the congressional level, city level, county level, and continue to organize here at the city. So Punch 72, I work for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin. And last but not least, Anthony Driver, Jr.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Anthony Driver Jr. My punch number is 73. So I was never into politics. This was never a dream of mine. It's not something that I wanted to do. I'm here out of a need and a necessity. I graduated from high school on June 11th. 2 days later, my best friend was murdered. A month later, another close friend of mine was murdered. It was at that moment that I realized that my talent, my skills, my education, and everything that I have in me could not be used for selfish gain. I had to use my skill set to help my community. So I decided to go to Howard University. I wanted to study politics in DC. I received 2 degrees from Howard University. I've worked in every level of government, from the White House on down to City Hall in DC, City Hall in Chicago. I've also worked as a grassroots organizer on Raise the Wage campaigns. I've worked to organize fast food workers, but I'm running for alderman because of my experience in the 20th Ward. I'm essentially the target demographic that everybody's talking about. When I go out and canvass, I'm a 6'3" black man, I'm a threat. I've been chased out of neighborhoods. I've been shot at while out canvassing. 4 generations of my family have come through the 20th Ward. My grandmother moved here in 1965. This is the only community that I know. I was born at the University of Chicago Hospital. So I'm running a very different campaign. I'm running an issues-based campaign, an issue-driven battle. The things that I'm focused on are getting the lead out of our water. I led a referendum for the November ballot to make sure that our residents had a choice as to what our city council did with the amount of lead in our water. I spent 78% of all my campaign funds to black-owned businesses. And it's not that I'm anti anyone else, but it's okay to be pro-you. It's okay to be pro-your people. And the reason I say that is because the city of Chicago has targeted black and minority communities for decades. It's 10 communities.
Seconds.
It's 10 communities, and 5 that are targeted for ticketing. 5 of them are within the 20th ward. So I'm focused on getting rid of gun violence without increasing mass incarceration. My name is Anthony Triibe. Punch 73 for me so I can get to work for you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for introducing yourselves. I just want to go over the rules a little bit before we get started. So we're going to have a respectful and equal forum here today. Please only tackle the issues, to the candidates, please only tackle the issues and not necessarily attacking each other. We only have a limited amount of time to be here. If the audience can reserve clapping until, the end, if you want to snap, that's perfectly fine, but let's hold our applause until the end. We want to save as much time as possible. And the way that we're going to start off is we're going to go over impact questions that we have for each candidate, and then after the impact questions, we'll go into some one-on-one questions that we have for candidates, and then we'll go into audience questions as well. We'll have about 30 minutes for audience questions. So Kevin, if you can kind of let me know before you need to leave, we can kind of speed things up for your question section. So to start off with our impact questions, we're going to talk about jobs and community investment. So we'll pull 5 candidates' names from here to answer the first question, and then we'll pull 4 for the next question, and so on and so forth. So for the first question, how will black businesses benefit from the Obama Library when it comes to this area? And we're going to start off with Kevin Bailey.
You guys also have a minute to answer, You guys also have a minute to answer each question. Try not to go over a minute.
Can you repeat that one more time for me?
You guys will only have a minute to answer.
The actual question.
How will black businesses benefit from the Obama Library?
The way black businesses will benefit will depend on how things are structured, what the different commitments are. But the way that you can structure the benefit of the black community is to ensure that whenever there's any type of development or investment that we have that goes into either the presidential center, that we're able to take that tourism traffic and push it into some of our smaller business back into our community so we can capture that revenue that's coming from the touristic industry. Not only that, but to make sure that the different contracts, whether it's cleaning, whether it's replacing lights, small maintenance, that we start to build some of those smaller companies that we can have here homegrown and make sure that it comes from small business owners that are also hiring people from the community to continue that internal build. That way we have something solidified so you can start off with some of these smaller contracts and build to become a national competitor. That's the way that we start. That is a high-level approach, but it is something that we have seen that works, starting off with some of those public contracts and start to work to the private sector.
Thank you. Jeanette Taylor, would you like to take on? How will black businesses benefit from the Obama Library?
So for supporting a CBA ordinance to make sure that the people in the community are able to benefit from the Obama Presidential Center coming, and then also making sure that we just invest in those businesses through our TIF dollars. Our TIF dollars have been used for Navy Pier, Wintrust, other spaces, but never for the people in the community. And so when you talk about all those dollar lots and spaces that they've given away to developers and contractors, why not making sure the people in the community who don't have the financial backing are able to get those spaces? And so doing door knocking, we ran into people who own daycares. They do hair, they cook. They have catering business, but they don't have that financial backing. Why not recycle their tax dollars into their own communities by allowing them to use those incentives to make sure that they're able to start their own businesses? And the alderman controls the zoning, and so making sure that when we controlling zoning and when people are putting in pitches for businesses in our community, that it's our people. Because we know people want to profit off the Obama Presidential Center, and we know it's not going to be us. So.
Thank you. And Jennifer Maddox, would you like to? How will black businesses benefit from the Obama Library?
Well, many businesses within the ward should benefit from the Obama Library. Many of the businesses don't even know or have a connection to what's going on with the Obama Center that's coming. And so we need to bring them to the table. We need to make sure that they are at the table to see how that they can work collectively together to make sure that we all benefit from the Obama Center coming. And just like the parents that I work with now over in Parkway, they want to make a livable wage. And so how do we connect them to what's happening within the community as far as the other businesses? Because I've talked to many business owners, and they know that it's coming, but they don't know how they can get connected and be brought to the table. So these are some of the things we need to start making sure that everybody gets connected and brought to the table.
Thank you. And Maya Hadari, would you like to talk about how Black businesses will benefit from the Obama Library?
So I honestly want Black businesses to benefit right now from the University of Chicago in preparation for the Obama Presidential Library. Right now, under the current mayor, there is the Chicago Anchors for a Strong Economy. It's an initiative that's supposed to use anchors like the University of Chicago and their contracting power and their money contracting with suppliers to fund very local businesses. We should be promoting some of our incubators to get contracts with the University of Chicago so that you can expand their capacity and build them. That should be happening right now in preparation for the Obama Presidential Center. We shouldn't wait for the center in order to lean on the university to support some minority business incubators right now. When the Obama Presidential Center comes, definitely they should do the same. There'll be an anchor. They should contract with local businesses, very neighborhood-based. The other thing we should do is do placemaking.
We're running out of time. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Anthony Driver, would you take round this out with how will Black businesses benefit from the Obama Library?
So the first thing is obviously we need a CBA ordinance, not just for the Obama Library, but for the businesses that are coming around, development that's going to be around the Obama Library. Secondly, I think that we should look at where the money is being spent in this race. As I said before, I spent 78% of all my funds with Black-owned businesses, and there's been over $300,000 spent in this race. That could have been a major catalyst for our community as well. And the last thing is, not only do I want Black-owned businesses to thrive that are there, which is why we need CBA ordinances, but I want new businesses. So that's why I'm proposing that we create a public-private partnership, a 20th Ward credit union, so that we can give people access to capital. Maybe there's a barber on the block. Maybe there's someone who has a lawn care business, but they don't quite have the funds to get started. So I want to create a credit union so that they can go and get a low interest rate loan and be a part owner of that credit union so that they can build on these vacant lots and start businesses around the Obama Library, and that our community can get back working and thrive again.
Thank you so much for answering those. And then we're going to go on to our next question.
This next question, we're going to start with Quandra Spate. My bad, I'm so sorry. What, if anything, can be done to make sure that Black and brown people aren't priced out of their homes with the Obama Library? So I'll repeat that again. What, if anything, can be done to make sure that Black and brown people aren't priced out of their homes with the Obama Library?
Well, as we know, we don't have any rent control legislation in the state of Illinois or Chicago. So I think maybe working with some of the state legislators to incorporate rent control legislation that will make it affordable for all residents of the 20th Ward, no matter what your income is. So I sat down with Senator Maddie Hunter a few weeks ago, and we talked about affordable housing legislation that she's working on, and how there were many years ago these real estate developers came to Illinois, rich real estate developers, and they decided to come up with legislation where we cannot have rent control. So we're going to be working with organizations like Lift the Ban organizations to ensure that we can be working on and doing research on what does affordable housing for everyone in our communities look like. Because as you all know, gentrification is coming, and we need to be able to protect ourselves from rising housing costs as well as foreclosures.
Thank you so much. Can we have Nicole Johnson answer next?
Thank you, Nicole Johnson. My punch number is 61. So to address the rising costs for Black and brown residents, one, I support rent control as well as Lift the Ban. Two, promoting the Community Land Trust, which will be a well-funded nonprofit that will acquire property, particularly starting with the vacant lands that are owned by the city of Chicago. So on those property, homeowners that live on blocks where there are vacant lots, they can go with their neighbors who are homeowners that live, they have to be owner occupied, to purchase and build on top of that land to create affordable housing units on that vacant land. So that does one thing. One, it allows homeowners to accrue more wealth within their two, it creates more community, because one question I often ask constituents when I'm door. Hello? All right. And then lastly, also supporting possible tax abatement as well.
Thank you. Next, we're going to have Maya answer the question, please.
So I want to clarify that the rent control legislation does not equal an affordable housing unit. The rent control legislation, or the push to change the 1997 legislation that will allow municipalities to establish rents that appreciate over time, that doesn't equal an affordable housing unit. All it says is a property owner cannot appreciate rent more than a certain percentage. Does not create an affordable housing unit. In order to create affordable housing units, we need to look at the financing that is brought to bear to do it. So rent control is not a magic pill. The second thing I'll say is we have pushed affordable home ownership initiatives in Woodlawn these last 6 years. We need to continue to push affordable home ownership programs in order to protect long-term neighbors in the neighborhood. We need to look at how we create housing units and the long-term property tax exemption for property owners.
All right, can we have Kevin Bailey answer the question next? And what, if anything, can be done to make sure that Black and brown people aren't priced out of their homes with the Obama Library Center?
I got a three-pronged approach, but first we have to stop some of these illegal evictions that's been taking place in my organization, and my office has been battling over the last couple years. So that's how we keep them in their homes, first off. Secondarily, we want to freeze taxes for the indigenous resident. If you've been here for a while and then your area becomes a TIF district, we need to make sure that you're not priced out. Two, I do like rent control. We need to make sure that we focus on that. And third, as we do have these different areas developed, we want to make sure that the affordable housing is a mandate that these developers are required to maintain, not necessarily pay a fine to avoid it. Those would be my approaches. Thank you. Kevin Bailey, 72.
Thank you, Kevin. So now we're going to move on to the next question. We have a lot of youth in the audience here, so we want to ask, do you all have plans to create jobs and after-school programs for Black youth in the 20th ward if elected aldermen? We're going to start off with Jennifer Maddox.
Good afternoon again. Punch number 67 for Jennifer Maddox. But I have established work programs for the youth for the last 12 years. Been working with our youth. And today, like I just said earlier, I just left 16 young men who are currently in an entrepreneurship program / mentoring program with residents and stakeholders within the community and some outside of the community that have dedicated their time to come and work with our young people to make sure that they are working. And we run a mentoring program every summer for 40 teens through One Summer Chicago, and we work with After School Matters. And we make sure that not only the teenagers are working, but we put their parents to work as well. And we make sure that we are training the parents to assist and work with the kids in the community so they're not fearful of one another, so that they can work alongside of one another, so that they can make sure that they are working together to support each other in the community. That's very important. So I'm going to continue, no matter what happens, to do this. Like I said, I've been doing this for the last 12 years, and we're going to continue to do this and bring the 20th Ward more resources and opportunities across the ward, from Woodlawn all the way to back of the yards.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your answer. Jeanette Taylor, would you like to answer, do you have plans to create jobs and after-school programs for Black youth in the 20th Ward?
Of course. So I'm already supporting an initiative for sustainable community schools, which allows schools to take open from 8 to 8. And as long as you live in the community, you're able to go to those institutions, because we don't have enough after-school programs. Making sure that we fund the youth investment bill that we fought for some years ago. There are good bills out there that can employ youth. There's just no money in them. They would rather put them in a cop academy and other spaces. And so making sure that the bills and the ordinance that are for young people get funded. And last but not least, making sure that we have a youth caucus and the youth are at the table, because we a lot of times decide to have a youth center here or something there, and young people, they had a say-so in it. And so making sure that they have their own caucus, and we're bringing them to the table to ask them what they want to see, what we should be putting money in instead of wasting our dollars.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your answer. Anthony Driver, would you like to take this one on? Do you have plans to create jobs and after-school programs for Black youth in the 20th Ward?
Absolutely. So my plan for job creation in the 20th Ward is to create a jobs training program. Each alderman gets a $97,000 expense account that they use for pretty much personal gain, the vast majority of the Black Caucus members at least. I want to take that account and use it specifically for jobs training. So if you need help with paying for college applications, if you need help finding apprenticeships, if you need help finding a vocational program, you should be able to come into your aldermanic office and receive that help. We absolutely have to get our community back to working. So in regards to you said after school programs as well, right?
Yes.
So I support more vocational training inside of our schools. As a person who graduated from college with 2 degrees and a ton of student loan debt, I realized that there is another option that a lot of our students should have access to, and that is vocational and skills training. You should be able to leave high school or after school program with certifications of being an electrician, a carpenter, a plumber, a graphic designer, things of that nature. So I support putting those programs, vocational programs, into schools, as well as skills training for after school and a jobs training program for our ward.
Thank you so much for your answer. Kevin Bailey, you're up next. Do you have plans to create jobs and after-school programs for Black youth in the 20th Ward?
Sure. So almost for the last 2 years, I have a cheerleading team. They practice at my office right now. They're national champions. They go and compete right as we speak. I was with them practicing last night. So after-school programs, absolutely. Furthermore, I've partnered with Richard Gallion on the acting classes to bring our kids acting classes. It teaches them how to articulate, public speak, and not be afraid of approaching people and having a conversation. So I'm already doing that type of work. Furthermore, when it comes to establishing real businesses, I've already helped create a health organization that was coordinated over 6,000 to 7,000 people's health care throughout Cook County. 35 people throughout the 2nd Commissioner's District have been hired based off of some of the work that I've put in. So I'm going to continue that work and make sure that we have access to that, whether it's tech, whether it's transportation, or green infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, Nicole Johnson, do you have plans to create jobs and after-school programs for Black youth in the 20th Ward?
Absolutely. So a multi-pronged approach I believe in re-envisioning our schools, particularly those that are underutilized, so they're not at risk of being closed. Co-locating nonprofits and other institutions that provide youth service and programs for after school. Also looking at how we can build partnerships with our Chicago Public Schools and the city colleges to create specific pipelines in some of our most competitive workforce development programs. So there's a specific cohort of people for the young people of the older siblings as well as their parents of the kids that go to those schools to enter into those workforce development programs. And our schools, especially those particularly like Emmett Till on 65th and Champlain, they don't have a funded library, and they have at least an entire floor that's unutilized. So again, being able to co-locate these after-school programs as well as these workforce development programs to train our young people so our schools don't get risk of closing. Nicole Johnson, Punch 61. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. We're going to get into our next question, starting with Quandra. And so What are some concrete ways that the University of Chicago could be a better neighbor to the surrounding Black communities? So again, what are some concrete ways the University of Chicago could be a better neighbor to the surrounding Black communities?
Okay, so I just wanted to just clarify my last answer. I also wanted to, in terms of housing, I wanted to work with the Department of Planning and Development and also take advantage of $1 lots for city lots for working families. But I believe that the University of Chicago can be a better neighbor by benchmarking on what other prestigious universities in other cities have done in terms of providing their low-income residents with free city education. I think they should allow our young people to be able to go to their schools for free. I believe that they should, if they're going to come into our communities, we should have more a Boys and Girls Club. They should open up, repurpose some of these schools that has been shut down so that we can get some vocational training, some home economics, things that is very much needed in our community. And also work with our community leaders such as Sunshine Enterprise and other community leaders who are doing a lot of wonderful things in our community to help our young people, to help with unemployment. As you all know, the city here in Woodlawn, we have less than 2% of all city jobs fall within Woodlawn. That is unheard of, that is unacceptable. So we need jobs and we can use their assistance for that. Punch 71, thank you again. My name is Quanda Spates.
Thank you so much for your answer. The next person is going to be Maya Hodari. And please hold the mic closer to your mouth. That's what creates the static.
Okay. So I'm Maya Hodari. So I have a number of ways that I'd like the university to be a better neighbor with us adjacent communities. One I talked about earlier is about expanding their initiative to contract with incubators and small businesses to help build capacity and wealth for 20th Ward businesses and 20th Ward families. The other piece that I'm deaf about and have leaned on them is to engage neighbors more when it comes to the proposed expansion of the University of Chicago campus. I think that we've fallen down in the past. There was a lot of pushback when the University of Chicago Charter School was developed on 63rd Street because of the lack of community engagement about that initiative. We see the same thing happening on 61st Street. The university needs to bolster its engagement with the communities that they're interested in developing parcels in. We need better access to those areas of the university, like the school system. We need them to open their doors during the summer and give our young people more access and activity.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Maya.
We're going to have Nicole Johnson answer the question next.
Nicole Johnson, my punch number is 61. So I see the university playing a pivotal role, particularly with businesses owned by constituents in the 20th Ward. The Polsky Center just received a $5 million gift, and they get these regularly. What I envision is a yearly pitch competition that can provide at least two to four local businesses with seed funding, and then opportunity to incubate those businesses within their business incubation programs. In addition to that, they have a fleet of buses that can help transport our seniors as well as our young people from one end of the ward to an after-school program, or get our seniors to some of our community meetings or their CAPS meetings when public transportation isn't always available or accessible to them. In addition to that, institutions like the University of Chicago, they apply for multi-million-dollar grants all the time, and they're also exploring ways in which medical technology, we could benefit from that to develop some cooperatives like they're doing on the west side with the Illinois Medical District. They have a laundromat cooperative. Why can't we do that same thing on the south side? Nicole Johnson, punch 61. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. We're going to have Anthony Driver answer this question as well. So again, what are some concrete ways the University of Chicago could be a better neighbor to its surrounding Black communities?
So the first thing that the University of Chicago can do is stop contributing to gentrification in the community. The second thing, it would be great if they would hire more people from the community. If the University of Chicago is going to be a catalyst and an economic hub for our community, then they have to be good neighbors. So whether that's parking, whether that's contributing to businesses surrounding the university or hiring more people from the community. And lastly, it took us way too long to fight for that trauma center. The university, we can't go through that again with the CBA. The University of Chicago, the president, Susan Scher, and everybody on down need to get on board with the CBA. That's what they can do to become better neighbors. And lastly, probably on a smaller level, I have an issue with the trauma center that's currently there now, because I've been in there a few times with gunshot victims and people who have passed away. And when grieving family members come into the emergency room, if they act too erratic or grieve too loudly, the University of Chicago has been calling the police on them. So I would really, really love it if the University of Chicago would change that policy, get a bigger waiting area for grieving families so that we can treat our residents with dignity.
Thank you so much for your answer. So that wraps up our jobs and community investment section of questions. We're going to move on to education. We have 4 questions there, and we'll start off with Kevin Bailey with the first one. What are your plans to ensure that each student in a 20th ward receives a good and properly funded education?
So education is a long portion time of your life, right? So right now I have a mentee, she's 12 years old. She's working on her master's degree in civil engineering, right? So I believe in investing not only your time, but investing actual monetary value into your kids. So I gave her a $5,000 scholarship. But when it comes to making sure that the entire community has access to solid education, the University of Chicago is an educational institution. Make sure that they're engaged in our schools, bring in the same resources they bring to their students at this university into the schools, high schools, elementary schools, making sure that they have access to arts, the sciences, because those are the industries that are growing. Technology, green infrastructure, this is what our country's needing, and that's what the jobs will be. So ensuring that they have education that makes sense for the future.
Thank you so much. And Jeanette Taylor, would you like to take this on? What are your plans to ensure that each student in the 20th ward receives a good, properly funded education?
So I apologize for not standing. This chair like crackling, and I'm scared if I get up and sit down that it might fall. So I apologize. I don't want you all to think that I'm being disrespectful for not standing up. For me, it's making sure that we use TIF dollars for what they were meant for, and they were to invest in our schools. And so making sure that the principals are meeting with the institutions in the community so that they're spending less money on things that they could get for free and more on bodies in the buildings. A lot of our schools have 30 kids in a classroom but don't have a teacher's assistant. And so how do we get teachers in those classrooms that support? Pushing to make sure that our TIF dollars, I'm gonna say that again, and I'm gonna keep saying that because those TIF dollars were initially created for that very reason, one of those very reasons. And so making sure that we do it in that way and making sure that the principals, the LSCs, and the parents are at the table when decisions are made. Too often, the school does a turnover or change and nothing happens. And also making sure that we put a moratorium on charter schools. They've sucked resources from public schools, and while young people are still in those institutions and we gotta take care of them, we don't need to create more.
Thank you so much. And Jennifer Maddox, would you like to take this one? What are your plans to ensure that each student in the 20th ward receives a good, properly funded education?
Okay, thank you. So currently we run an after-school program. It's called Future Ties. And we service 40 young people in our after-school program, and they come Monday through Friday from 3 to 7. And what I've learned just working with the young people that come to our after-school program, they come from 8 different schools. Majority of them live in Parkway Gardens, but they go to 8 different schools because the parents are trying to find the best education possible for their child. So they're sending them out of the neighborhood in order to do so. So I've noticed that many of our schools are really underfunded, they're understaffed, they have a high turnover rate of teachers, and they have a lot of kids in the classrooms. So we need to make sure we allocate resources to support not just the students, but the teachers as well, because many of them are spending money out of their own pockets to make sure that they have the supplies that they needed in order to make sure the children have what they need in the classroom. Also, we need to train and have workshops for our parents, because our parents don't know what to fight for for their children. They don't know if they have an IEP. They need to know what services are available for their children with their IEPs. I've been sitting at the table with a lot of the parents, going with them so that they know that their children have rights when it comes to their education. So I would sit down with each and every principal and find out, get a plan together that we can not only support the kids and the parents as well.
Thank you so much for your answer. Quandra, would you like to take this on? What are your plans to ensure that each student in the 20th Ward receives a good, properly funded education?
Okay, so just like the population of the city, our schools' population has declined as well, from 407,000 to 368,000. So as a voting member of the City Council, I'm hopeful that whoever the new mayor is has an overall plan for our education that improves the student outcomes for our city. As the alderman, I will focus on improving the infrastructure of our schools, our facilities, and how we repurpose our schools that exist in our ward. My desire is that the Chicago schools is at excellent level par in terms of education and meets the national standards. Furthermore, I will advocate as the alderman and work with each community to make sure that each community has a committee, an education committee, that we can all work together, ensuring that our schools and our children are getting the best education possible, as well as working with the students, the teachers, CPS administration, as well as the chief executive officer and the chief education officer here in Chicago.
Thank you so much. And we'll round out this question with Maya Hadari. What are your plans to ensure that each student in the 20th Ward receives a good, properly funded education?
So again, my name is Maya Hodari, and education is a big piece for me because I'm a mother of an 11-year-old. So the first thing I'd like to do as alderman is institute monthly task force meetings with the principals across the ward. I want to understand the disparity in terms of a well-funded school, which includes technology, includes giving our middle school kids Chromebooks to take home with them for the whole year, doing online blitzes outside of the classroom as part of homework is a key component to making sure our kids are reaching their academic attainment. So sitting down monthly with principals and really assessing where they're at with the resources for their school, looking at for each school beyond technology, trying to bolster the engagement of the community to do additional fundraising to fill the gap in what the CPS provides and what is needed. Looking at the differentiated learning curriculum. So within the classroom, I definitely am a fan of small class sizes, but looking at the teacher and their curriculum, making sure it's differentiated to meet the needs of all the kids in the class are some of the things. The key is monthly task force meetings.
All right, thank you guys for all your answers. We're gonna move into our next question, and we're gonna start with Anthony Driver Jr. So recently there's been a lot of articles suggesting that CPS is monitoring its students on social media pages for gang activity and calling in the police for intervention. So what are your thoughts on CPS monitoring its students' social media pages for gang activity and calling in the police for intervention?
I think that's completely ridiculous. I think that's a completely ridiculous way, and it's intrusive to our students. Secondly, that needs to go right along with the gang database. So there's no way for you to look at a tweet from today and a week from now and label someone a gangbanger. There's no application that you fill out to become a gangbanger. That's why the gang database is completely corrupt and needs to be wiped. And lastly, using the police who have absolutely no training in psychology and violence prevention and de-escalation tactics, I don't think that's very helpful at all. That's why I support wraparound services for CPS. I believe for every 250 students we have, you should have at least one counselor. There's a lot of our young people dying in the city of Chicago and witnessing traumatic events. When our veterans go away and fight and they come back, they have access to mental health resources. Why don't our kids have those same access? Why can't our kids receive counseling? Because it's a lot of us that are walking around, myself included, who've witnessed a lot of gun violence on the streets, who've watched my friends be murdered. And it would have been very helpful to me if I had access to counseling while I was in high school. So I do not support CPS doing that. I think that's a completely ridiculous tactic, and it needs to be done away with right along with the gang database.
Thank you, Anthony. We're gonna have Nicole Johnson answer the question next.
Nicole Johnson, Punch 61. I don't agree with that invasion of privacy. I think depending on when they look at a particular student's social media, that could just be one instance that they may or may not be associated or affiliated with the gang, and that's not fair to even consider them to being that. In addition to that, I definitely support the ending of the gang database. Obviously, it's not working because we are in this situation that we're in today, so there's something that's wrong there. In addition to this, these are other strategies I mentioned. I think that we need to look at addressing student conflicts and their violence more in a restorative manner. Our young people need to be participating in cognitive-based therapy, which is a key element of the Becoming a Man program that's being shouted around the entire country. This is a way that young people can mediate their conflicts with one another without resorting to violence. Also looking at a partnership with the Department of Public Health that has closed our city clinics, our mental health clinics, to ensure that our young people that are able to be seen on a regular basis for the trauma that they experience and exposed to. Nicole Johnson, 61. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. We're going to move on to Maya Hadari to answer the next question. So again, what are your thoughts on CPS monitoring its student social media pages for gang activity and calling in police for intervention?
So I absolutely disagree with it. Again, as a mom of an 11-year-old, I know far too well that my son's curiosity can sometimes get the best of him. So I do not want him or any of our kids to be adversely affected by something posted on a Facebook page. Yeah.
Thank you.
And we had Kevin Bailey up next, but it looks like he left the event. We didn't know prior to the event starting that he had to leave early. So we're going to send questions to him and get his responses, and we're going to publish those questions for everyone to have access to. So moving forward, everyone will be able to answer every question since it's not 9 people anymore. So we can go on to Jeanette Taylor, if you would like to take this question on. What are your thoughts on CPS monitoring its student social media pages for gang activity and calling in the police for intervention?
Yeah, so it's one of the main reasons why we need an elected school board, because that appointed school board makes decisions based on who they're attached to, and it's never our young people. Definitely why are they monitoring that? I'm so glad Facebook wasn't around when I was a kid, because I'm sure I would be in some base or something that they would have on there. But at the end of the day, while they're calling the police, they need to invest in more counselors and case manager. So for people who don't know, recently I just lost my mother 2 weeks ago, and my kids, one goes to Ray Elementary, the other one goes to South Shore, and I had to call them to tell them to get a counselor to talk to my kids. And that's not my job. That's something you're supposed to provide. But in other communities, if you got a shooting that's up the street, they bring a whole busload of folks. And so it's the priority of Chicago Public Schools, and so definitely, and us using restorative justice. We have too many punitive things that happen to our young people. For one infraction, you get suspended for 10 days. And so us just changing that.
Thank you, and I'm so sorry for your loss. We're going to have Quandra answer the question next.
Sure. Can you say the question again? I'm sorry.
What are your thoughts on CPS monitoring its student social media pages for gang activity and calling in police for intervention?
Okay, so I definitely do not agree with monitoring social media pages for our young people. I think, especially given the current situation we have with our police, we definitely need to have police reform. We need to definitely have restorative justice in our community. We need to make sure that we're not penalizing our children for being children. And a lot of times that's all that they are.
I'm sorry.
the same initiative across the entire ward. In terms of the gang database, I definitely do not agree with abolishing it, but I do agree with making sure that the database is updated. So I will work with the city, the Chicago the Police Department to ensure that the data is correct and it reflects the real-time status in the city. Because at the end of the day, our community needs to know real crime that's going on in our community, and we shouldn't abolish something that actually educates our community on the criminal activities that's going on in our community, as long as it's updated and correct.
We're going to move on to
Space 71, I'm sorry.
We're going to move on to Jennifer Maddox to answer the question finally.
So,
We're gonna, hold on, sir. We're gonna hold audience questions to the end. Please respect the candidates' time. Candidates, please be respectful to the audience as well.
so being in the heart of working with young people every day, knowing that they are attached to their phone constantly, knowing that they on social media every day, knowing that that's how they communicate with one another. It starts at home. Parents need to start monitoring their kids' social media pages. I have a 32 and a 30-year-old, and I still monitor their social media pages. And if I see something that's on their page, I send them a text message real quick and say, take it down. And only because we know that this is how things happen in the community. We can be sitting in a classroom setting right now and the kids are saying something about somebody that's negative, whether they bullying them or if they're just saying something that's just mean. And that's how conflict and stuff arises. When you're closing schools and you're sending kids out of one neighborhood into another neighborhood and you know that you're crossing gang territories and boundaries, that becomes an issue, and the kids act these things out on social media. I want to talk about this more afterwards, so please come and see me because I really want to get into the heart of what happens with social media and how it affects our young people. Thank you, number 67.
Thank y'all for your answers to that question. We're going to move on to the next one. With the recent school closings in the 20th Ward, students will have to travel outside of their neighborhoods to go to school. What are your plans to get students to and from school safely? And we'll start off with Jeanette Taylor.
Could you repeat the question? You said a whole lot. I'm sorry.
In light of the school closings in the area, what are your plans to get students to and from school safely, since they have to travel to go to school now?
So making sure we fund the schools that are here, that we have, and make them attractive to parents who are here. But definitely making sure that we do safe passage. Now, I wasn't a fan of safe passage because I felt like they were paying off community groups to do that, and that they weren't hiring the people in the community. But it has worked in places like Teal, Hamlin, and Chavez, and so it has employed their parents. And so doing those little things and making sure that we have a better relationship in our communities. We can no longer afford to work in silos, and so that mother that's on the block who knows all the children, connecting them, and also having our young people having a seat at the table when we're making decisions and we're talking about what's the need in the community. So.
Anthony Driver, if you can step up and let us know what your plans are to get students to and from school safely in light of the recent school closings in the area.
So one, we need to repurpose and reuse those closed school buildings. But we can't legislate our way out of violence in the city of Chicago. So what I'm proposing is that we create a youth council made up of the youth from different neighborhoods that can come to the table with the full power of the alderman at their disposal, and they mitigate their own conflicts. That's something that has been successful for me. As an aldermanic candidate, again, I'm the target demographic. When I'm in these different communities, I'm crossing different gang lines, and people are looking at me as a 6'3" young black man who's bearded, who doesn't always have a suit on. But the way that we have to address that is to actually go at the problem head on. You have to be an alderman who's willing to come out of the office and get involved into the community. It's not enough to be a good legislator. It's not enough to be good at constituent services. The 20th Ward needs a champion. We need someone who's going to be active with the police department and holding them accountable, holding the mayor accountable, writing good legislation, but also involved at the street level. And I want to be clear because a lot of people look at me as I'm young and they're like, are you supporting gangbangers? No, that's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that we do have to get involved with them. It's not too late for any of us. So I've been in my community, going door to door with people who are from that community and actually being able to cross lines that are gang lines and bringing those communities together. So that's one of the things that's very important to me, and I think the Youth Council will be the way to mitigate violence.
Thank you so much for your answer. And Quandra Spates, if you would like to answer this question, what are your plans to get students to and from school safely in light of the recent school closings in the area?
Well, I agree with Jeanette Taylor. We need to fund these schools to ensure that our parents and our students see that we have quality schools within our communities. Also, making sure we have safe passage workers. I know a lot of these non-for-profits have employed these safe passage workers, but we need to make sure that these safe passage workers are being paid. From my understanding, a lot of them were not getting paid or their paychecks were coming late. That's unacceptable. We need to make sure we have non-for-profits who are employing the people within our communities who are out there watching our children come and go back forth and home safely. And also, this is another reason why I support elected school boards. We need the community, the parents within the community making decisions for our community. It makes it more attractive. It also makes sure that we're getting the resources and the attention we need for our schools. And also, community schools have always been a pillar in our community. As a young kid, I used to be able to walk from school to home. We need to make sure that we continue to have that in our communities. It's so important, especially for the safe passage for our children from school to home.
Thank you so much for your answer. Jennifer Maddox, if you would like to take on the question of what are your plans to get students to and from school safely, since students now will have to travel outside of their neighborhoods to go to school.
So as far as safe passage, I've been working with a lot of organizations that employ safe passage workers. And one of the things that I've found out is that it's good to employ some of the residents that live in those areas where those schools are. So around Dulles and Till, majority of the parents who are working for Safe Passage have students that go to Dulles and to Till. So there's that community neighborhood connection right there that starts with the parents learning who the kids are in those neighborhoods. And so some of the policies that Safe Passage have, I think we need to look at those and address those, because some of them are not able to like cross the kids across the street. They're only supposed to just stand there and just watch them. But I do see some parents do take an initiative and to actually cross the kids across the street and help them, because we don't have many crossing guards out there anymore. And so they need to be able to help and assist the kids through the safe passage areas.
Thank you so much for your answer. And Maya Hadari, would you like to come in and share your thoughts on what are your plans to get students to and from school safely in light of the closings?
So for me, I think the most vulnerable students are high school students. I think that we have safe passage workers in place in the neighborhood that really support the elementary schools, but the wider school boundaries affect high school students because there are so few of them. So I want to know immediately those 20th Ward high school students that have to travel beyond the 20th Ward in their neighborhoods to get to school. In the longer term, I want to look at the neighborhood boundaries for charter schools in the 20th Ward, because for me, those charter schools should have a neighborhood preference. They should allow our high school students to attend the University of Chicago charter school. Charter schools usually cream and are very selective in the students that they admit. I'd like to push to have more of the ones in the 20th Ward invite and enroll more 20th Ward high school students so that they don't have to travel so far outside the ward to get a quality high school education.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And last but not least, Nicole Johnson, what are your plans to get students to and from school safely in light of the school closings in the area?
Yes, Nicole Johnson, Punch 61. So a multi-pronged approach. I am going to work with my state legislator colleagues that service the community to ensure that our school bus busing is refunded. When I went to Beasley in first grade, we had 40 buses. By the time I made it to 8th grade, we had 10 buses left. This was all designed to continue to segregate our schools so that fewer people across the city would be able to go to this great school, this very well-funded school. In addition to that, as I mentioned earlier when we talked about the university being a better neighbor, our high school students are most vulnerable to being caught in crossfire, so there should be opportunities for them to be transported to and from public transportation that'll take them to wherever their school is. And also expanding safe passage to ensure that every school has it. Every school does not have safe passage. Nicole Johnson, 61.
All right, thank you, candidates, for your answer. We're going to move on to our next question, starting with Anthony Driver Jr. So, in light of recent sexual scandals in CPS, what steps will you take to hold CPS accountable in protecting our youth from sexual abuse in schools?
So I think that begins with a elected school board, someone that's accountable to the people and not to the mayor. But also, I think we need an independent monitor. The same way I think we need an independent monitor for the CBA agreement. We need someone who is elected by the community, who is completely independent of any institution whose sole job is to monitor abuse reports that are coming out of CPS. This has been going on in CPS dating back to the early 90s and probably before then. So I believe this is a problem that we can fix and that we must fix. And I think an independent monitor is the way to go. Anthony Driver, punch 73.
Thank you, Anthony. We're going to move on to Jennifer Maddox. I'm going to repeat the question. What steps will you take to hold CPS accountable in protecting our youth from sexual abuse in schools?
I think currently CPS has put in place policies now that they have really are doing extensive background checks on individuals that are working inside the school, which they should have been doing that a long, long time ago. And I'm just glad that now that they have that policy in place, they have the level 1s and the level 2s. So it's really difficult and hard now to get inside of a school, and also they're doing a little bit more screening, which is really good for them to make sure that the people who are working around our children aren't predators. And I have to do that as well with my after-school program. I have to make sure that the people who are working around our around our children aren't sexual predators, and they're allowed to be able to assist us with our young people. It's very important. Because we have to make sure our children are our number one priority. And by saying that, we have to make sure there are policies in place that support and assist and protect them. Thank you, Jennifer Maddox.
Thank you. We're going to move on to Nicole Johnson. What steps do you take to hold CPS accountable in protecting our youth from sexual abuse in schools?
Before I answer that question, it says I support the COP Academy. I don't. So if you saw that, I don't support the COP Academy, so that might have been a typo or something like that. But in addition to hold our CPS authorities, as was mentioned by Jennifer, it is much harder. I'm on the LSC and of Kershaw, and it was hard for me to come in there to volunteer. I had to go through a whole different process. So they are putting more things in place, barriers in place to protect young people. As alderman, I will be meeting twice a year with our school leadership across the 20th Ward and ensure that faculty and staff members are going through those necessary trainings, just like you do with your HR department with your job. We need to make sure that our staff are undergoing the same training as well. Nicole Johnson, punch 61. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. We're going to move on to Jeanette Taylor. So what steps will you take to hold CPS accountable in protecting our youth from sexual abuse?
So definitely it's an elected school board, and also to go back to what Anthony said, some independent monitoring, but us implementing sex education and health, because those things already happen, and there are a lot of stories that we haven't heard about. And so at Mollison Elementary, we had a case where there was something with 2 kindergartners, and they talked to those families. One family took the kid out, the other family kind of went off on this kid, and it's because we don't have conversations with our young people about their body parts. And we're so quick when those incidents happen to hide them. There has to be some mandate and some heads got to roll when that happens, because there are plenty of stories we hadn't heard of, and so we got to fix it. And so making sure that we got counselors and case managers, health and sex education.
Thank you, Jeanette. We're going to move on to Quandra. What steps will you take to hold CPS accountable in protecting our youth from sexual abuse in schools?
So this sexual abuse scandal isn't something new. It's been going on for many years in Chicago public schools. I'm happy it's come out, but it should have came out much, much longer ago. As a city council member, I would vote on any ordinance that will hold CPS administration members accountable, the principals, the teachers, put people in jail, also do extensive background checks, as well as do zero tolerance and sexual harassment training in schools, not only for the principals, for the janitors, for anyone who work around children. We need to make sure that people are being trained and people are being held accountable when they're working around our children. Punch 71, Quandra Spates.
Thank you. And last but not least, Maya.
So I'm Maya Hodari. So the first big push is an elected school board. I think the accountability needs to rest with everyday people, not with the mayor's appointed board. And I think in doing so, you push for more transparency. Secondly, I do truly believe that we need to have more continuous conversation about inappropriate behavior. I think that we do sex ed in Chicago public schools. Parents have to agree to allow their kids to participate in sex ed, but we also need to talk about inappropriate behavior at a very young age. Oftentimes, you have instances that happen and kids don't even understand when they're on that downward spiral and being victimized. So educate our kids more and have those ongoing discussions on the front end. Do it with parents too, so that you're educating not just the kid, but the parent, and everybody is tunely aware.
Thank you so much. And that concludes our impact questions round. Are y'all still with us? Are y'all how y'all hanging in there? So now we're going to move on to what we're calling the hot seat. We have questions for each of the candidates based on things that we've read in the news, based on fundraising, based on things that the community is concerned about for individual candidates. So we're going to go in ballot order for that as well. Jeanette Taylor, can you talk about, you've received tens of thousands of dollars in donations from unions in the past few months. How do you feel about the presence of big money in politics, and should we be concerned about big donors swaying politicians' policies?
So I do believe in public financing for elections, I do. But I don't apologize for getting the union support, because I've worked with those unions for the last 10 or 15 years. So are you against fighting for 15? Are you against school closing? Are you against housing for all? Because those are what those unions do. And are you against us making a living wage? And so my thing is, you so worried about that money, what have you been doing in your community while you worried about who is investing in my campaign? And so when I started running for office, I didn't have any of those things. And while some unions I knew I would get the support of, I didn't expect to get the money I have. And it's because I haven't taken money from developers. I haven't taken money from the University of Chicago. I don't work for entities and then come out publicly and say I believe in something else. And so for me, it's I'm being who I am, and I got it based on me just being honest and truthful. I ain't the most educated out of the group, but I got heart. I'm out here fighting every day, and so that will continue for me. So win, lose, or draw, I still will fight and advocate for the 20th Ward.
Thank you so much for answering that question. We're going to go to Nicole Johnson. Residents are concerned about where your campaign dollars are coming from. Your donors have given campaign dollars to Rauner and Emmanuel and Ed Burke in the past, and currently are linked to University of Chicago and Emerald South. How can black folks trust that you will work for them?
It's egregious to try to connect me to Rom and Rauner. I'm going to say that point blank. So that was definitely a stretch. But the individuals who have contributed, so the people who have contributed high dollar, which I consider anywhere between $250 or $5,000, are people that have invested in me for the past 10 years. They are former scholarship donors from the University of Michigan. One of my donors has contributed at least over $100,000 to my college education. So for that, I will not apologize. My college, as well as my graduate education at the University of Pennsylvania. These relationships that I built are coming from personal and professional relationships, from my work as a classroom teacher or working at Teamwork Inglewood. This is what is required to do this work, which is to look at your network and see what people assets they are and how they contribute to your dream. And that's exactly what people signed up when they submitted on my Act Blue. Nicole Johnson, Punch 61.
I just want to follow up a little bit because I didn't really hear an answer about the University of Chicago connection.
Again, those are professional relationships that I've developed previously before running. And that's how I began thinking about and having conversations with individuals who are able to say, yes, we can do this work procurement. Yes, we can start this startup fund for local businesses to incubate them in the Polsky Center. Or yes, we can think about what are some of the emerging markets that you all are researching and how can we use that to develop businesses in the 20th Ward. These are conversations from the VP of Government Affairs all the way down to legal counsel and public affairs that I've had with people. And I've been very transparent in the conversations and what my priorities are, who I'm speaking about and who I'm putting up my priority, which is Black people, because I'm a Black woman.
Thank you so much for going into that. Maya Hadari, in the past, you've been a vocal advocate for the Obama Center at community meetings and have criticized people advocating for a CBA. Why should the organizers in this room trust that you won't side with the Obamas over community members?
So I am a strong proponent of the Obama Presidential Center. I think that we are overdue, our neighborhoods are overdue some transformative investment. So I am not balking off of that. The community benefits piece, I'm for community benefits. I'm not for someone outside our neighborhoods executing a community benefits agreement and saying they're the ones to hold the Obama Presidential Center or the city accountable. I'm for neighbors, their voice having meaning. I'm for neighbors having a role in the decision making. I'm for neighbors being the ones to hold people and entities accountable for community benefits.
Thank you. Sure, if it's really quickly.
I have a report that's on my website. 65%, it comes from me doing call time, anywhere between $5 and $250. So the majority of my campaign funds do not come from high-dollar donors. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We also have some fact-checking and stuff going on in the background as well, so that may pop up again at some point during the forum. We're going to go to Jennifer Maddox. You're a police officer, and we've read reports about the police code of silence along with the DOJ's report about discriminatory practices in the department against people of color. How can Black folks trust that you will not become another alderman that will be the police, that will put the police before the community?
So just based off of my history working with the police department, people can fact check me. I've worked 22 years with the police department, and I have not had someone to come to me and say that I have been mishandling funds or abusing anyone. I've been working hard in the community since day one, and that's why I'd established a nonprofit in the community. I've used my own money, not only for my nonprofit, but for my campaign. And the people that are supporting me outside every day are strictly volunteers. They are not people that are being paid, because they know the work and they know my heart and they know the passion that I have for the community. So they sign up daily to be out there on the street for me. Not because they're getting paid, but because they know my heart, they know my passion and what it takes to work in the community. I'm at the polls every day. If you see me, you come out there, I'm standing outside every day for you, and I'm gonna work for you. And that's just who I am. Number 67, Jennifer Maddox.
So we still kind of need an answer when it comes to who you're going to side with when it comes to a situation such as Laquan McDonald and Alderman, choosing to go with Rahm and being paid off by Rahm and not, being on the side of the community. So if something like that was to happen, who would you choose to side with? Would it be the police? Would it be the community? How would you handle that?
I'm going to choose what was right. Right is right, wrong is wrong. And I work with my young people in the community every day, and we work and train them on knowing their rights and what it is they're supposed to do if they're stopped or detained by the police. I'm an advocate for what's right. What's wrong, I am not an advocate for. And even officers know. They know my heart. They know if I come upon a situation and I see that it's not being handled correctly, I'm that officer that's going to speak up. And I'm that officer that's going to make sure that you're treated fairly and make sure that whatever's going on the street is going to be fair for both sides.
As an officer for 20 plus years, is there a case where you've spoken up and where you've spoken up and advocated for the community instead of the police?
All the time. Yes. I do it daily.
Okay. Thank you. Quandra Spates, I'm sorry. You've said that you support charter schools remaining on the menu of options for families, but we also know that charter schools have drawn students away from our neighborhood schools and helped bring about closings. What will you do to ensure that neighborhood schools don't lose students and resources due to charters?
So I support any educational institution that is going to educate our children. I don't believe in expansion of charter schools. Like I said, as city council member, I will work with my other city council members to ensure that we have an elected school board. I would influence whoever to make sure that we have funding in our schools, our current CPS schools. I'm a product of Chicago Public Schools. When I was a kid, we had all kind of recreation. We had vocational, we had home economics, we had music in our art in our schools. We need to bring those things back. So I will support making sure that our schools has the best quality education, the best programs and initiatives to make sure that when our children get out, that they are ready to get into this world and be productive citizens.
Thank you. And last but not least, Anthony Driver, some of your political experience comes from your time spent with the Chicago Mayor's Office of Public Engagement. Can you talk about your decision to go work for Rahm Emanuel?
Of course. So I didn't work for Rahm Emanuel. It was an internship, a fellowship, which I'm very proud of, because in order to learn how to break systems, you have to learn how they operate. So I'm focused on breaking down systems of oppression. That's why I decided to go to Howard University and study in D.C. That's why I worked in congressional offices. That's why I worked in the White House. I worked in City Hall. I wanted to be the kid, the student, the advocate who was able to get an intimate view of how Rahm Emanuel moved before I can destroy the system that created Rahm Emanuel. Rahm Emanuel is nothing but an individual. He's nothing but a person. He's a figurehead. It's the beings around him that are controlling, that are not helping us get the lead out of our water, that are keeping us from raising the wage, that are perpetuating violence in our system, in our schools. So that's what I've been deadly concerned about. I left Chicago a man on a mission. I watched two of my friends be murdered, and I knew I had the talent. I knew I had the skills. But there were certain boxes that I had to check as a young black man before society would take me serious. There were certain boxes I had to check as a 25-year-old before I knew people would take me serious as a candidate. That's why I'm standing here today, and I have the most political experience on this stage. I've worked in every level of government. I've worked at every level of grassroots activism. Excuse my language, but I bust my ass for my community over and over so that I can make sure that I understand these issues and that I can break down systems of oppression.
Thank you so much. So now we're going to open up the questions to the audience. If anyone has any questions, please. Yeah, are we passing around a mic or how are we going to do this? We're going to pass around a microphone. Please hold your questions to less than 20 seconds. You know, we are still under a time restraint, and still let's be respectful and try to have a respectful conversation between audience members and the candidates.
Hi, my name is Jean Clark. I live in Woodlawn. I grew up there. I have a question for Nicole. I hear you telling me that your answer is to give someone a vacant lot so that they can build on it, and of course that will help keep everyone in place and make it affordable. But in order to build on a lot, what would your income have to be?
Okay, I thought I was waiting for the mic. So in terms of the income, it would be a standard person who's a homeowner because it's a cooperative. So you're actually building a cooperative of multiple homeowners, and the community land trust. This is based off the community land trust idea that I've been presenting. And because about 90% of our census tracts here in the 20th Ward are prospective opportunity zones, this is a good opportunity to bring in both people's private dollars, like private investment, as well as people who live on that block to build those homes.
I own a lot, and I'd like to build on it. I can't afford it.
I mentioned that you have to have multiple households.
I do. I mean, the thing I'm saying is, Nicole, I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate your efforts. But in order to keep it affordable, a lot of us, we've discussed it. You're talking about the community land trust. You're talking about where our properties will never increase in value.
No, I said it won't accrue as much value as market rent, but this does not mean that this is building an economically inclusive community. So on this particular parcel of land where multiple homeowners have contributed to build this house, this multi-unit structure, right? That area does not accrue as much equity. It still accrues equity, but not as much as other market rate rent around it. I mean, market rate property around the land trust, the property that's in the land trust.
We can talk later. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Thank you.
Anthony Driver, I think, has a response to it as well.
So I absolutely agree with you. What the city of Chicago has done with the vacant lot program is it's a semi-good job, right? So you take poor residents, you sell them a vacant lot for $1, but then you've essentially stuck them with a burden. Now they have to pay $3,000 to $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 in taxes on that property a year. If you don't maintain it and cut the grass, if there's litter, the city comes out and tickets you. So you took an already resident who may or may not be struggling financially and gave them another burden. That's why I'm proposing that we start a credit union so that they can get the loans needed to build on those vacant lots and properties. And I would love to stipulate within that credit union, when you take that loan out, that you hire 30 to 40% of the people from the community to work on that. So now you got rid of a vacant lot, you gave a resident who didn't have property a chance to be a property owner, and you're employing the community. That's how we get dollars circulating within our community, and we don't have to look so much to outside entities for help. Then we don't have to look to the University of Chicago and other stakeholders to employ us. We can employ our own community and build for ourselves.
And we'll give Nicole a chance to respond.
The point of this isn't just one household that's contributing and building this building. When I mention multiple households, that's you, that's Ms. Craig, that's General Hafiz, whoever is on that block who want to go in tandem, and that's what cooperatives are. Are they contributing their own dollars? No, they can find credit financing just like you want to buy any other type of house or you want to construct an entire building yourself.
Thank you, Nicole. We're going to move on to our next question. Sorry, when you mind saying your name and.
Hi, my name is Kenneth Newman. I've been a substitute teacher before in CPS, in private schools, Catholic schools, charter schools. There are charter schools across the city where they have not properly built a playground or a gym inside the building, or the building didn't have a gym to begin with, and yet CPS and the State Charter School Commission allowed these schools to open. The physical fitness of young people in Chicago, especially in minority communities, is poor. What would your feelings be as alderman if somebody else wanted to open up a charter school in Woodlawn, whether it's on the east of the Dan Ryan or west of the Dan Ryan, and those schools did not have the proper physical fitness facilities in order to keep students fit?
Any candidate want to take that question on?
Well, I agree, because with my nonprofit, we don't have space to make sure that our kids get the recreation that they need. So we do partner with Dulles, and it took us a long time to get inside of the school to be able to use their facility. But after school programs and other programs that want to, connect with public schools should be able and be allowed to come inside of the schools and to use those recreational facilities. They're very important. I remember when I was in high school, I think gym was cut down to 2 years. And so by that happening, you know, many of the kids didn't have to do public education, physical education, for the last 2 years of their high school. But it's very important that we do open up the facilities to bring back public education.
And Jeanette has a
physical education.
Jeanette has a response too.
So making sure we don't expand any more charter schools and we look at what we have, but also make sure that they are connected to a park district or another school. Too often, there's an institution right across the street that the kids could benefit from to go to, and because we are not working together, those kids never get the opportunity. One of the things that disgusts me about Dyer High School was those kids wanted ESPN Rise Up, but they took gym online. And so it's the reason why, yeah, I know, how do you take gym online? They did for their senior year. Kid, look at that, you can ask. They took gym online. And so making sure that in creation of any new schools that we make sure that physical ed is an elementary and high school requirement, because you're right, they're only required 2 years of gym when they need to do it all 4 years. So just making sure our institutions work together.
Thank you, and we're going to take another question. And you, if there's any youth, teenagers, kids in the audience too, you know, we want to make sure that y'all get y'all questions in as well. So please stand up and say your name first.
My name is Skylar Spratt. I actually go to CPS school, Andrew Carnegie, right there. It's not just the supplies that we don't have. Actually, there's problems with sanitary needs in the bathroom, because like they wouldn't have soap from when school started till the middle of the year, and people need soap to wash their hands to get sick, but then students have to miss school because they're sick because the school won't provide soap. And also it's very unsanitary, because we were having a assembly to see about other students, and there was a mouse that ran through our gym. So I feel like we need to have better sanitary, better hygiene with my school, and I feel like other schools in Chicago too.
Let's let Maya answer first.
So that definitely underscores, Skylar, the need for well-resourced schools. When you have very active, engaged parents, and even the community surrounding the school, you can get at basic needs. I know most parents are asked to send a whole carload of supplies for the first day of school every year. And if you have some households that are struggling, it's not reasonable to burden them with spending money on things like soap for the school. For me, that underscores the continuous dialogue that aldermen and all of us need to have about how to better support our neighborhood schools. So thank you, Skylar.
Go ahead, Jeanette.
So stop siphoning off our public sector jobs. Aramark is who cleans the schools, and they're the same people who take care of the prisoners. So it's the reason why your school doesn't have soap and it's not clean, because there's not a budget for that. They've cut that budget, and they've cut old school janitors, people who used to live in our communities that actually work in our schools. And so making sure we put the public back in public schools.
And also, I would just like to add that although the aldermen are not in charge of the school budgets, we do have a lot of influence over the things that goes on in our schools. So working with the Chicago public school systems to ensure that we have the resources, making sure that our parents come out, because believe it or not, our parents have a lot of voice. If we can come out and show that we are unified and that we need these type of sanitary hand soap, anything, books, whatever our children need, we need to be working together to make that happen as a community.
Thank you. We'll let Nicole respond. This is the last response.
As a classroom teacher, this is a very important topic, making sure that our young people have everything they need, from books to just, like you said, basic hygienic resources. This is a prime opportunity for us to elevate our local Black businesses that have custodial and cleaning services that can get these contracts to provide the soap and the tissue. I've had to do donors choose to get these basic resources from my classroom. So this is a prime opportunity to make sure that our local businesses get contracts with our local schools.
Thank you, Nicole. And now we're going to go to our next question. Who do we have?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kerwin Spratt. I'm Skylar's father. And I've heard everyone say that they support an elected school council. My question is, when I look at politics in this country, from the federal level all the way down to the local level, it seems as though the person who's elected is the person who has the deepest pockets. So with you guys as candidates who support an elected school council, how would you implement something where that's not the case with a local school council? Because just recently in Los Angeles, someone spent $1 million of their own money to get on a local school council. So what do you do to keep the big pocket person off of the school council, because all they're doing is wielding their influence again?
We're going to let Anthony Triibe take this one first.
So I wholeheartedly agree with you. We have to get big money out of politics. At the end of the day, no one's going to give you a large sum of money and not expect anything in return. So I fully support an elected school board, but I would love for that to be coupled with public financing of campaigns. If every candidate had the same amount of money to spend, then you are running on merit, you're running on credibility, you're running on the work you've already done. Right now, our system is so broke, it's about who can get their message out the most. And many times that message is lies. But if I can pay enough money to get my lie out to enough people, you can still get elected in the city of Chicago. So we have to publicly finance our campaigns and get the money out of politics, as well as having an elected school board.
Anyone else want to take that on? Maya?
So LSCs coupled with that, so just being a parent and a working parent, it's hard to find those that are truly committed and can dedicate the time to participating on an LSC. I definitely am not an advocate for somebody who wants to spend a whole lot of money to have a seat to say that they represent the interest of parents. That definitely needs to be pushed out the way. And it needs to be advertised when it does happen. So parents at that school can say, no, that's not what I'm promoting. I think that we need to figure out a way to make the LSCs a little more robust so that more parents, maybe it's the timing of the meetings or how parents better engage, but it would be a wonderful way if working parents could become more engaged at the LSC level.
Thank you, and we'll let Jeanette take the last response.
So I absolutely agree with you. So I was on the LSC for 21 years, and Chicago is unique in that way because we're the only city that has LSCs, and we're the largest elected body in the United States. I agree with public finance, and I definitely agree. And the amount of money that you get doesn't necessarily say who you'll work for, because you're supposed to work for the people. And if people look at who is financing them, what stake do they already have in the community? So we talk about, you know, people having the most money, but they are union members in the community. And people vote with their feet at the end of the day. And so, yeah, it is a contest about who has the most money, but it's about the people in our community having a say-so. And I totally believe it's just like with the petition phase. It drove a lot of us crazy, and it's the reason why people don't vote, because they sign these petitions to get people on, and then they get knocked off for the smallest thing. These people thought enough to sign these petitions. So it's a way of us making sure that the people who are impacted and living in the communities have a true say-so. And what you do is, when they don't do what they're supposed to do, you re-elect somebody else. It's just really being at the table and practicing that right to vote.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next audience. Kwanja, real quick.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to just piggyback off of what Driver said, Jeanette and Maya. And also, that's a really good question. I was just thinking about that the other day. But I think we also need to cap the campaign funds, maybe from $10,000 to $15,000, because it shouldn't take $1 million to run an elected school board election.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next audience question.
All right, I just want to make it clear that I am looking at all of your hands and I'm taking a stack. If you don't know what a stack is, I'm putting in order which way you'll speak. So just so you guys know that. And please hold the mic close to your mouth like this so people can hear you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm sorry. Darius Randall. All right. Good afternoon. Reverend Darius Randall from Vernon Baptist Church. And Vernon Baptist Church is from 6400 South Champlain, and it's a landmark location. It's been around for almost 100 years. But I wanted to ask the alderman candidates, beyond just ministry, I'm in the trucking industry. And Norfolk Southern Railroad, 63rd Street there, and it pretty much runs to 59th. You know, it's a huge railroad, and it's a huge economic engine for this area. I'm in and out that rail yard so much. And there's a lot that's in the news throughout the years from a lot of the guns that's being, brought into the community. They say that the guns are coming out of the railroad, and a lot of the guns that's on those trains, kids are breaking into those trains and stealing those guns, and they're getting into our neighborhood. It's a huge economic engine there. There's tons of jobs available, but majority of those jobs, the 20th Ward residents don't have them. And at the same time, Norfolk Southern
we need your question, sir.
is making all this money off of the community, and there's no investment. So what are you all going to do as 20th Ward Alderman, the next 20th Ward Alderman, to deal with the guns coming out of the railroad, at the same time making sure that the Norfolk Southern is an economic engine for the 20th Ward?
We're going to go to Nicole first.
So I grew up in Inglewood, just down the street from where Norfolk Southern expanded and got rid of over 100 families, so this is very personal to me. I will be revisiting that whole deal, particularly to make sure that there are community benefits to create a pipeline of the jobs. They're advertising jobs right now on LinkedIn, Norfolk Southern. We can have young people interning and being analysts on those trains right now for the summer, but we're not aware of that information. So ensuring that my conversation with the executives from Norfolk Southern, we're in constant communication about the various opportunities that are available. Transportation is a huge engine for the country in general. Chicago is the transportation hub of the nation, and we have so many parcels that are coming in and out of the community. So making sure that there are other ancillary businesses that can be developed in that industrial zone around Norfolk Southern from 63rd to 57th, Dan Ryan to Wabash, essentially. We can be building businesses that can support a lot of the transportation and the goods that are coming in. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jennifer Maddox had to step out for a second for a family emergency, but she'll be right back. We're going to go to, I'm not sure who had their hand up first, but let's go to Anthony. I'm sorry.
So I think we need to be very open and honest about how we talk about Norfolk Southern. We need to have more community engagement, but in my personal opinion, Norfolk Southern is persona non grata. They are not welcome in our community. Norfolk Southern has contributed to the destruction of Inglewood. They have moved people out of their homes and not adequately built on that land. Also, many people are probably familiar with the bait truck. There's no rail yard on 55th and Ashland. Why is Norfolk Southern's police force parking a bait truck on 55th and Ashland where there's no rail yard to bait our young people into stealing sneakers and then locking us up? So they're also contributing to mass incarceration. And then thirdly, they still aren't hiring people from the community. I'm not a person who believes any institution is too big to fail. If you're not serving our community, if you don't have a history of serving our community, then you can be replaced and you're expendable. And that's the same thing with aldermen. Vote them out, and we also need to replace Norfolk Southern or put together some concrete measures to hold them accountable because they've been contributing to the destruction of our community for a long time. It's about time for it to stop.
Thank you. And we have about 7 minutes left for questions, so let's go to our next audience question.
Hi, my name is Matthew Johnson. From the federal level down to the local level, before you vote on anything, the members are given those documents ahead of time. So if you're elected as alderman, what would you do to assure us that you will vote on the best interest of us? That you would not wait like the parking meters wait, and they give it to you the last minute, you voted on it, and didn't know what was in that ordinance. How would you specifically share with us that you're going to vote on our interests, and if you don't know what's in there, you would not vote on it? How would you do that? Because running for alderman, you come outdoors, you knock, you get signatures. Will you abstain from voting until your constituents know what's in that bill?
Thank you. We'll go with Quandra first.
Great question. I think as the alderman, the power belongs to the people. We're just a voice. We're there to represent the community. So as I mentioned earlier, I will have community committees in each community, making sure that as ordinances come up, I communicate that to the community so we can have a discussion. We're going to discuss it, and then before I cast any kind of vote, I will make sure that I'm representing the community and their voices.
Any other candidate want to jump in?
So I believe in transparency. One of the key things that I want to always promote is ongoing, continuous dialogue. That means monthly meetings, that means newsletters, that means having open office hours, that means communicating about pending legislation at the local level. I think that that is the key, and it's required as we move toward a new 20th ward, and that should be something that we all demand regardless of who becomes the next alderman.
Thank you. Now we'll take another audience question.
Just a quick thing, because we only have a certain amount of time, make sure your questions are very short and concise, and if I don't get to you, I don't know. I hope these candidates are around to answer some of your questions later, but I'm sure they will be, so make your questions quick.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Peru, a part of BYP 100, Chicago chapter in the Obama CBA coalition. My question is, in what ways and how have you supported benefits agreement for the Obama Center? A lot of people tend to say, like, they're for it, but as far as like you being here on my side pushing for it, it's a different story. So if y'all can answer that, that'd be greatly appreciated.
Anybody want to jump in? Jeanette?
So before it was popular and before there was an automatic race, I was pushing for a CBA. I was actually the person who got to ask President Obama the question of, you know, yeah, that's a great idea, but why not a community benefits agreement? So for me, I know what it feels like to be displaced out the community you love. It happened in Bronzeville, what we call a low end, you know, they give it a fancy name. And so for me, I'm already fighting to stay in the community that I love, and so that will continue, win, lose, or draw. And so talking about a property tax freeze, talking about making sure that people who build housing here don't get to opt out, and making sure that the housing that they're doing that's affordable is for families, because that's how they kick us out of the community. And so I've already been fighting for it, and I'll continue to.
I think the first thing is to make sure you're having conversations about it and making sure you really support it. So being on the board of the NAACP Southside branch, we've had conversations about the CBA. We've actually gone and talked to community leaders about the CBA agreement and why it's important in the Woodlawn in particular. So I think, once again, it's about making sure you're having those conversations and you're really serious about it, and you're talking to individuals who can truly impact whether or not we're going to have a CBA agreement.
Really quickly, Maya.
So I support community benefits. I am a huge proponent of saying that the Obama Presidential Center put on a website that they were going to do specific things, and right now, here today, we should hold them accountable to achieve those, regardless of there being an agreement in place. For me, they said they were going to do it. Let's make sure they do it. Having a signed agreement, I'm interested in entities and neighbors being a party and being the ones that hold the Obama Presidential Center, the University of Chicago accountable. For too long, ordinary, everyday people's voices in our neighborhood have been ignored, and we have other entities that come out and say that they're the ones that represent us and they're going to ensure that other big institutions are accountable to us. That's what gives me the most concern.
All right, awesome. And we're going to do 2 more questions.
Hey, how you guys doing? My name is Matthew Wilborn. I'm here with Good Kids Mad City, one of the organizations engaged here. So one thing is that I'm part of a demographic, right, that isn't rushing to the polls, right? So that's the youth, primarily black and brown youth. And something that is often said among us is we don't feel like our voice is heard or counts, and we don't feel like our vote counts. So my question to you is do you think the youth vote counts to you, and are you counting on them to come to the polls?
Let's go to Anthony Driver first.
Absolutely, and that's something that I've made a point of my platform from the moment I announced my candidacy. The reason that I decided to run for office at such a young age is because I know I can be a bridge builder. I can be a person who can be a dynamic leader and can bring the youth into the process as opposed to pushing them out. I'd love to share a very brief story from where's Arnold? Was that yesterday? I think it was yesterday. It was one of the days we were standing outside the early voting site, and all of the candidates have been back and forth to the early voting site trying to talk to voters as they walk in. Directly across the street at the Cosmo Beauty Supply, there's about 4 kids selling loose cigarettes that are all of voting age. Standing right there the whole entire time. No one approached them. No one solicited their vote. No one talked to them about the issues. I went across the street, talked to them, chopped it up with them for a little while. They went down the street, got all of their friends, and came to the polls to me. That's what I mean when I say that we have to put people back in the driver's seat. You talking to every voter that walked right past you, but right across the street, like where you're standing, there's 4 kids who all need to be engaged. Who need to be engaged in this process, who would love to get out and vote, and all it took was a small conversation, just reaching across and talking to them. And I also have added 1,000 people to the rolls for the 20th Ward, and that started in Parkway Gardens where I registered about 80 young people in one day during the Safe Summer event. So I think that, that this generation particularly is a generation that's going to carry us into the future, and we have to make sure we engage in them.
Okay, so we're going to go to Nicole, and we did start the event a little bit late, so we're going to keep going for about 20 more minutes. So Nicole, go ahead.
The vote definitely matters. We can't build a future that doesn't include our young people. This is the community that's going to service them in education, workforce, and health. As an educator, ensuring that young people are involved in the process, that's always been my #1 priority. Working with Chicago Votes, involved in getting young people out to the polls, not just with bringing in the big parades to the poll we had with Chance the Rapper, but also on the high school level, getting buses, chartering them, and sending them to the polls, registering them. I've done that even over the past year. I've been a Peace and Education, which is a charter school in the 20th Ward, getting them involved and having various pop-ups on various civic topics as well. So getting young people involved and getting out to vote and having them make sure that their vote is important and believe in this system is crucial, because at the end of the day, it's what governs their future.
Thank you. And Jeanette Taylor has to leave to attend a funeral, so she's going to do her final words. And in those final words, can you also discuss the legacy of corruption in the 20th Ward and how you won't fall into that? You have a minute.
Yeah, so that's one of the questions that's always asked on the door. Usually when I knock on the doors, I ask people one thing you want to see come to the community and one thing you want to see go. And usually they ask me, how you going to stay out of jail? And so what I tell people is, I don't look good in orange. It's not my color. 2, their bologna has no first name. I eat, it's obvious. So I like to eat good bologna, I don't have that. And 3, it's not enough to vote for me. I got to take you to city council with me, and you got to be at the table with me. And for too long, not only young people, just Black and brown folks in general, we don't have a seat at the table. We never have a say-so. We elect folks into these offices, and we don't see them again the 4 years later. I give people my personal cell number, and my campaign has a fit. You can't advocate for people that can't call you and talk to you. It's like we got to be real about the change that we want in our community. And so I'm a community organizer, and what I tell people is this job is nothing but a community organizer with some money. You organize around what the people want to see in the community. And so that's what I'm doing. So my punch number is 60, and I'm asking for your vote. But at the end of the day, the 20th ward will be good with the majority of the people who are running. And so it's not enough for us. Whoever gets that seat, we need to all still be working together to make sure that we're protected, because they're not just going to, the Obama Punch Center is not just going to affect Woodlawn. It's Washington Park. It's Inglewood. They're going to sell it. You're 20 minutes away from the Obama Presidential Center. You're 30 minutes away. And so we can get back to the little beefs and class issues that we have later. Let's get back to now staying in the community that we love. Thank you all.
Thank you. And we're going to jump into the last two questions. Yeah, last two.
Word.
What's up? What's up?
So my name is Taylor. I'm a youth with the group Good Kids Mad City. We do a lot of work in the 20th Ward and just the neighborhood surrounding this area. We've been doing something we call Feed the Block for the past 3 months, which is at least twice a month we'll get out and provide hot meals to anybody who might need it. My question is, I'm sorry. I missed a big part of that. Okay. During this time, we do our safety surveys, which is where we ask the community what resources they feel they need in their neighborhoods. And over 90% of them report that they would like more job opportunities, more community centers, like tutoring and literacy programs for their kids. My question is, what is your plan to make sure that those resources and opportunities are provided to them? And also, how do you support organizations like us, youth like us, who are not necessarily non-for-profit, but are still out here trying to transform our communities and our neighborhoods?
Anyone want to go ahead, Quandra?
So currently I work with several organizations. So I work with She Votes Illinois, I work with NAACP, I work with No Shots Fired. We're all community organizations. And so I think when you have organizations like that, you all need to pool your resources together. So at NAACP, we have grant writers. So I will work with an organization like you to let's create some grants. Let's go out there, write some grants so we can get some money, some funding. Also, you have a lot of church leaders that are out here. Let's talk to the churches. They should be giving back to their community as well. I don't think we utilize our churches like we really should. And so just working with organizations like you, combining our efforts. Some organizations get more money than others. We need to figure out why and how can we go after some of these resources.
Maya?
So I am a tireless advocate for bringing resources to our Southside neighborhood. Last year, I tried to become part of the Chicago Women Foundation have a Southside Sister Circle, and the whole idea is for African American women to all bring $1,000 to the table so that we can begin doing grant making. I think there should be more of that to support very small grassroots efforts, because that's where change starts in any of our neighborhood. That's where change started for me trying to improve our neighborhood. I like the idea of going to some of the philanthropic organizations and telling your story and doing that across the 20th Ward, having more information, maintaining a database so that we know of everybody who's out there trying to make a change, because it's going to take all of us. So again, being more aware, working collaboratively, linking small grassroots efforts like yours to the Chicago Women Foundation, Southside Sisterhood Circle, who means to be making grant making to impact neighborhoods.
Thank you. And then we'll go to Nicole, last response.
I believe that you all should build your own sustainable community. So as I mentioned at the top of the conversation about developing small businesses that can provide professional services, you all can develop your own business that, whether it's whatever trade, whatever service that you want to provide. If there's someone who's a chef, someone who's an artist, we can figure out how to get those goods or those services that you all create, and give them and serve them and sell them not just to local developments but across the city of Chicago, so that you can have regular revenue generating within your organization, so that you don't have to always go out of your own pocket to buy the hot plates or buy the little things that keep the food warm when you're outside at 20 degrees on Vernon.
Thanks, Nicole. And now we're going to go to our last audience question.
Again, I just want to reiterate, if I didn't get to you, I'm so sorry. Just know I really internalized and felt that hurt. But you guys can, for the remaining candidates that are staying, I wouldn't want to bombard them, but, go up to them and ask them those questions that you didn't get to. So we're going to take this very last question. And
hi, my name's Amanda Espedia, and I just have a really quick question for each one of the candidates. First, how long have you lived within the 20th Ward? And second of all, do you own or rent in the 20th Ward? Thanks.
Start with Anthony.
I've lived in the 20th Ward every year of my life, minus the time I was away in school. I've never lived in a different community. My grandmother moved into the 20th Ward in 1965, and my entire family still reside within the 20th Ward. I have over 100 family members within the 20th Ward. I have Carl left, that are on my campaign staff. Every single one of them is a 20th Ward resident. Every person that works on my campaign is a 20th Ward resident. So that's something that is very important to me. And what was the last piece to that question? So I rent. On my one block, my family has about 7 pieces of property in the surrounding community, and I do rent on my block, but I'm looking to purchase.
Nicole.
I've lived in the 20th Ward my entire life. 6 when I turned 6. My grandmother purchased a historic gravestone in Inglewood in the 70s, and we moved in 96. Only time I was away at school, and I plan to purchase another home for my family in the 20th Ward.
And Maya?
I'm Maya Hodari. I was born and raised on the south side of Chicago. I bought my first and only home in the 20th Ward in 2004, and that's where my son has spent his entire life.
And Quandra?
I've lived in the 20th Ward since 2012. I am a landowner. I am a landlord, and that's why rising housing costs and gentrification is very important to me. It's a very important issue because I don't want to raise my rents on my tenants. I want to keep them where it's affordable.
Thank y'all. And we have one fact-checking thing that we wanted to ask Anthony Driver, and then after that we're going to do candidate wrap-ups.
Thank you so much. According to a February 2016 article published by the Chicago Teachers Union website by Kristen Sutnick, a CPS psychologist, she said she saw 2,510 students at 3 schools. Meanwhile, the National Association of School Psychologists recommends a school psychologist to pupil ratio of 1 to 1,000. Do you believe the city of Chicago should meet the national ratio of 1 to 1,000? If so, how would you lead that initiative?
You said 1 to 1,000. Can you repeat that again? I didn't.
Sure thing. The national ratio is 1 to 1,000. Ms. Studnick met a 2,510 to 1 psychologist. You mentioned during your remarks earlier that you would like to have a ratio, I believe, of 1 to 250.
Yes.
If that's correct, how would you like to lead that initiative?
So I believe that we need more counselors. Chicago is a very unique city. Our violence levels are higher than other cities, and therefore there's more young people who have experienced traumatic events. That's why I don't believe 1 in 1,000 is enough. I believe we need to get that down to, you said 1 in 1,000, right? I believe we need to get that down to 1 for every 250 because we do have a larger population of students that have dealt with traumatic events. And as far as leading that initiative, I want to divert all TIF surplus funds to CPS. I believe that's how we start to pay for wraparound services. Our schools need clinics, our schools need counselors, and our schools need better staff, not just teachers, but better staff as well, more staff. So that's how we'll lead that initiative.
We're going to go to Maya for the last response.
So I think I agree wholeheartedly with Anthony in terms of us needing more counselors. I think about my son all the time and the level of violence that he's been exposed to in our neighborhood. It far exceeds anything that I ever experienced as a child on the South Side. We didn't hear gunfire every other night. We didn't have people being murdered on our streets. So I definitely support having counselors in place that can deal with the level of trauma that many of our kids have experience. In terms of TIF, though, I want to talk about tax increment financing because that is a huge resource for creating affordable housing units. So I would caution us on promoting the use of TIF exclusively for CPS because if our desire is to create additional affordable housing units, then we need a source of financing that subsidizes the creation of that.
Thank y'all for your responses. And so we're going to go into the candidate wrap-ups, and we'll go in ballot order for that as well. So Nicole, if you would like to take a minute to say your final words and to also, in those words, address the corruption that's been going on in the 20th Ward.
Yeah, Nicole Johnson, Punch 61. And I remember it was a Friday evening, the first Friday after we could circulate our petitions, and I was on 63rd and Woodline, and I was knocking on doors for those new homes that were built in the early 2000s, and a gentleman, a handful of them had worked with the incumbent, and flat out he asked me, how are you going to make sure you don't go to jail? And I was taken aback, but it was a real question, and it was one that I have been thinking about time and time again. How do I make sure I don't go to jail? Making sure that we can expand the power of the IG's role, whether there is a connection between a campaign contribution and a development or a zoning amendment approval that was made on behalf of that alderman. We need to be able to follow and track that money and make sure that there is greater transparency. Most importantly, I want to make sure that there is initiative that I started when I was working at Inglewood was a committee of community members and developers and residents that were able to weigh in on these zoning applications and these development so that it was be able to provide the aldermen more valuable support that was more responsive to the community needs. We are at a remarkable time here in the city of Chicago, and if we don't get this election right, not just here in the 20th Ward, but also at the city of Chicago and the new mayor, we are on the brink of something that we couldn't even expect, and we can't even anticipate what's on the other side of February 26th. And so I'm honored to be here and present my case to you. This is about the future of public and making sure that our institutions in Chicago, most importantly, is a city that upholds its motto of a city that works for us all. We deserve better. My punch number is 61, Nicole Johnson. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. So now we're going to go to Maya. Can you take a minute to say your final words and also address the corruption that's been going on?
So my name is Maya Hodari. Please punch 62. I truly believe that this is not the time for everyday neighbors to succumb to outside influence or powerful influencers outside our neighborhood. This is for an everyday person who consistently pushes back against power and isn't afraid to advocate for everyday families to be at the helm. It's a critical point in the 20th Ward's history. We have the opportunity to define growth in our neighborhoods in a way that was not presented in the last 60 decades. We've been starved. We need someone who has the gumption and the heart and the integrity to continue to rally for everyday families and has the experience to promote and push a track for growth in our neighborhoods. We also need to go to the polls and vote. I realize that we've had a whole lot of options in front of everyday neighbors in the 20th Ward. We have 9 candidates, and that can be overwhelming. I want to really encourage you to exercise your right to vote this week. It's a critical time. The future of our neighborhood is relying on your vote, and our kids deserve it. So please come out. When it comes to corruption, again, we allow powerful outside influencers to define who gets in that seat. We've done that consistently for term after term. It's time to change it.
Thank you.
I'm Maya Hodari, punch 62.
Thank you, Maya. And we'll go to Jennifer Maddox. Can you take a minute to say your final words and address the corruption with 3 aldermen being found not guilty on charges in the last few years?
Okay, excuse me for stepping out. I apologize. I'm going to do as I'm told. I was just told by my mom to stay here. I'm not going to get into it, but they just rushed my mom back to the emergency room. But I'm going to do the best that I can. But I am here, and I am the person who I feel that you guys deserve as your alderman. I'm always accessible. I'm always approachable. I'm always someone who's willing to listen. I'm always someone who you can knock on my door at any time, because many people across this ward have my personal phone number and always are reaching out to me to help them with advice and anything that they need as far as supportive services. I've been here. I'm not going anywhere. I ask for your support. I ask for you all not to just think that just voting for me, it's over, because it's not. I'm going to need you to maintain and continuously keep a relationship with me, hold me accountable for the things that you need for this ward, because I do truly care. I care. I've been here. I've been here putting in the work for so long, and I want to continue to do this across the ward. You guys can talk to me anytime. I openly give my phone number out. It's not a problem. Everyone knows how to reach me. Police support, punch number 67. I am that candidate that truly stands by her word, and I mean what I say. If I can't do something, I will not lie to you and tell you that I will do it. We will try to work together collaboratively to see how we can do it together. This is our community. Let's stand and work for our community and move our community forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And now let's move on to Quandra Spates. Can you take a minute to say your final words and talk about the corruption that's been going on in the ward?
Okay. Here in the 20th Ward, we need a candidate, we need an alderman who's going to be competent, visible, and accessible. I'm not uniquely qualified because I have 15 years of HR experience. I have 4 degrees, a JD, an MBA, double masters. But because I'm willing to roll up my sleeves and go into these streets and talk to the people and listen to the concerns of our neighbors, we need street lights. We need speed bumps in front of our elementary schools. We need to clean up our vacant lots and board up our vacant homes. We need to be working with our community leaders, our school principals, our church leaders. That's what makes me uniquely qualified. The fact that I'm willing to listen and assist and do what's right for this community. Additionally, I will bring all my expertise and experience to the alderman position. When I'm elected, the people will know that they have an alderman led by the people. They will know they have an alderman that believes that a government should work for the people, and I will hold myself accountable to the people. You will have a fresh set of eyes. Right now we have, this is a very important race. We need a fresh set of eyes. We have a chance, like Maya was saying, to elect, not select, but elect the next alderman. Someone who's fresh, someone who's gonna respect the community, someone who has integrity, and someone who's gonna work on your behalf, and who's gonna put the power back into the hands of the people. So if I go to jail, we're all going to jail. So that's how I'm gonna deal with the corruption. So, it's time out for the machine. We really need to make sure that the next person that we elect is not sent in from outside influence. We need to build our community together. Thank you. Punch 71, Quandra Spates.
Thank you so much. And now we're going to go to Anthony Driver. Can you take a minute to say your final words and talk about corruption?
I'm looking to end that system. I'm looking to foster a new era of transparency.
Thank you, Anthony. Let's give a round of applause for all of our candidates. Y'all have been so loyal. Thank you for sticking with us and being a part of the conversation and having such a great conversation. This event was put on by the Triibe. That's the Triibe with 2 eyes. It's on the chalkboard up there if you want to follow us on social media or go to our website, thetriibe.com. We'll have these slides and everything published on there for everyone to have at their fingertips. Also visit shy.vote. If you're looking into the election and trying to figure out who you want to vote, we have a voter guide there. Some of the candidates, I imagine, will be hanging around to talk after the event. Also, shout out to Good Kids Mad City, who was a youth sponsor for this event. Let's give them a round of applause. And also, let's give a round of applause to Experimental Station and Southside Weekly, who also helped us put on this event. Please follow all of them as well. Thank you so much. We'll be around.